I was always the plain one. At family gatherings, my sister sparkled like a diamond while I stood in the shadows, unseen. They laughed at me, dismissed me, said I would never be beautiful enough. I believed them, until the night everything changed. At her lavish engagement party, I hid in the back, wishing I could disappear. Then her fiancé stopped mid-speech, staring at me with wide eyes. He pulled out his phone, turned it toward the crowd, and whispered, "Wait, isn't this her, on the Vogue cover?" The room froze. And so did my heart. I grew up believing that some labels can never be peeled off. Mine was the plain one. My sister wore her crown of beauty with ease, while I wore silence. At birthdays, relatives would beam at her and mutter polite sympathy at me. "Your sister is gorgeous," they'd say, with glowing admiration. Then, turning toward me, their voices softened, their words laced with pity. "But you have such a kind heart." I learned early that kindness was code for invisible. At school, teachers complimented her looks while praising my effort. Even when I brought home awards, certificates I had worked nights to earn, the applause was muted. My mother would glance at the paper, nod, and say, "That's nice, but did you see how stunning your sister looked at her recital?" Beauty outweighed brains, effort, and heart. To them, my achievements were background noise in a song meant only for her. The older I grew, the heavier the label clung. At family photos, I was pushed to the side, dimmed by the bright flame of my sister. At dinner, I was interrupted mid-story, as if my voice was never meant to matter. Somewhere along the way, I stopped trying to shine. It was easier to shrink myself than to face the disappointment etched in their eyes when I dared to dream beyond their expectations. Yet labels cut deeper than silence. They carve scars. I remember being 14 when I placed a ribbon I'd won on the mantel. My sister walked by, snatched it, and laughed. "They must have been desperate to give this to someone like you." She tossed it aside. My mother didn't scold her. My father didn't intervene. The message was clear. I was meant to accept my place in the shadows, but shadows grow heavy. By the time I was 20, I carried the weight of invisibility like a chain. The cruelest part wasn't what they said. It was what I started to believe. I believed I was plain. I believed I would never be chosen, never be admired, never be enough. And yet, someone outside my family saw something they never did. It started with a casting call. I had applied in secret, trembling as I typed my name into a website, my photo attached with shaky hands. I told no one. Weeks later, an envelope arrived. It bore my name, crisp and clean. My heart raced as I opened it. I had been invited to audition for a small modeling agency. My first chance to step into the light, but my sister got to it first. I found the envelope days later, torn open, tossed in the trash beneath her makeup wipes. She smiled at me that evening, her voice syrupy sweet. "Oh, Amelia, you shouldn't waste your time on silly things like that. Modeling isn't for plain girls. Focus on something realistic." I froze. My chest tightened. That invitation was never meant to be hers, but she had destroyed it before I could even try. That night, I cried in silence. I pressed my forehead against the cold window pane of my bedroom and asked myself why. Why was my sister so afraid of me stepping onto a stage she had always claimed as hers? Wasn't she already the beautiful one? The adored one? What threat could I possibly pose? The truth slipped in like a whisper I had tried to ignore. She was afraid that if I dared to stand in the light, someone might see me. Someone might notice that beneath the label of plain, there was something more. And that fear, her fear, was more revealing than any insult she had ever thrown at me. The realization burned and soothed at the same time. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker inside me, a stubborn flame she couldn't extinguish. Maybe I wasn't invisible. Maybe they just wanted me to believe I was. I didn't confront her. I didn't scream. I didn't tell my parents what she had done. I simply tucked the truth inside my chest like a secret weapon. If she was afraid of my light, then one day I would give her a reason to fear. She was right to be afraid. By day, I was still the plain sister. At family brunches, I smiled politely while my sister soaked up every compliment. At work, I blended into the office background, my voice steady but never loud enough to echo. My parents barely asked about my life anymore. They saved their questions for her, as if her answers mattered more. To them, I was predictable, invisible, and safe inside the cage they had built for me. But at night, I became someone else. In the quiet of my small apartment, I transformed. I would slide on a second-hand dress I had thrifted, stand in front of my cracked mirror, and practice poses I'd studied from fashion magazines. I set up my phone on a stack of books, balancing it just right, and hit record. For 30 seconds, then a minute, then longer, I moved as if the world was watching, and it was. One clip went viral on TikTok, just me, spinning in a dimly lit room, my hair falling loose, around my shoulders, my eyes steady and unafraid. It was nothing glamorous, nothing polished, but something about it caught fire. Comments poured in. She's breathtaking, underrated queen. Why does she remind me of a Vogue editorial? I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Strangers, people who didn't know me, who didn't carry the family bias, saw beauty where my own blood never did. For weeks, I lived in two worlds. Amelia Carter, the plain one, the afterthought, and the anonymous model who was suddenly booking small gigs, growing a quiet following, becoming more than just a girl in the shadows. The duality thrilled me. It terrified me too. If my family ever discovered this secret life, I knew they would crush it before it bloomed. But in the privacy of my apartment, there were nights when I forgot them all. I would turn off the camera, lean closer to the mirror, and just look at myself, not critically, not searching for flaws, just looking. My reflections startled me. For the first time, I didn't see plain. I saw fire in my eyes, a softness to my face, the hint of a woman I had never been allowed to be. A quiet smile curved my lips. I whispered into the stillness, "You're beautiful." The words felt foreign, but they felt right. Those moments became my sanctuary. I'd close my eyes and imagine standing beneath bright lights, cameras flashing, not as the overlooked sister, but as Amelia, the woman I was becoming. It wasn't about proving my family wrong anymore. It was about proving to myself that I had always been more. But what I didn't know was that my sister's fiancé had already noticed. The opportunity came swiftly, almost unreal. A major brand reached out after one of my clips caught their attention. They wanted me for a Billboard campaign. At first, I thought it was a scam, some cruel trick. But when the contract arrived, legitimate and professional, I realized this was real. I signed it trembling, my mind spinning. Soon, my face would rise above the streets of the city, larger than life. and no one in my family had the faintest clue. The photo shoot was a blur of bright lights, makeup brushes, and encouraging voices. For the first time, I wasn't just playing pretend in my mirror, I was living it. I posed on rooftops in flowing gowns, with wind tangling my hair as cameras captured every angle. The team treated me like I belonged there, like I wasn't an imposter wearing borrowed confidence. When they unveiled the first mock-up of the billboard, my chest tightened. That was me, Amelia Carter, not the plain one, not invisible, me. But with the excitement came dread. I was asked to keep the launch under wraps until the official reveal. The date? The same weekend as my sister's engagement party. I laughed when I read the email, though it sounded more like panic. Out of all days, it had to be that one. One of the stylists, oblivious to my family history, chuckled when he mentioned it. "Oh, this will be perfect. Imagine, while people are celebrating your sister, the whole city will be celebrating you. What a coincidence." Coincidence. The word rang in my ears like fate disguised as chance. I tried to breathe, but the thought of that night haunted me. What if someone at the party recognized me from the campaign? What if the images leaked early? What if my family's carefully maintained narrative, that I was nothing compared to her, crumbled right in the middle of her perfect evening? The truth was inevitable. My secret double life was about to collide with the one I had lived for decades. And when it did, nothing would ever be the same. The clock was ticking and I wasn't ready. The night of my sister's engagement party shimmered with excess. Crystal chandeliers bathed the grand ballroom in golden light. Champagne glasses clinked like tiny bells, and laughter rippled through the crowd like a rehearsed symphony. My parents beamed, proud hosts of the event that would cement my sister's status as the family jewel. I slipped through the doors quietly, my black dress simple compared to the glittering gowns around me. No one turned to greet me. I found myself pushed toward the back of the room, near the catering staff, as though I belonged among the hired help rather than my own blood. My sister floated through the room like royalty, her hand tucked delicately in her fiancé's arm, her every gesture drawing attention. She spotted me lingering in the shadows and smirked, her eyes sharp with disdain. "You should be grateful we even invited you," she whispered when she passed, her smile never breaking for the cameras. Later, when the guests had gathered to toast, she raised her glass high, her voice smooth and cutting. "To love that sees beauty, and to beauty that earns love. Some of us are lucky enough to be blessed with both." Her gaze flicked toward me like a knife. The crowd laughed softly, indulgently, and I felt heat climb my cheeks. My chest tightened as though a hand had reached in and squeezed. I tried to swallow my shame, but the words burned. My throat stung. I lowered my eyes to my drink, fighting the tears that begged to fall. For a moment, I wanted to disappear, to melt into the marble floor beneath me. "No one will ever look at you the way they look at me," she hissed in passing, her lips curling with triumph. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. The urge to cry pressed hard, but I held it back, my lashes blinking furiously. I told myself to stay silent, to endure, to survive the night. And yet, even as I stood there breaking apart, something inside me pulsed with defiance. Because she was wrong, until someone did. It happened so suddenly that even I didn't understand at first. The music quieted as her fiancé, dashing in his tailored suit, lifted his phone and frowned at the screen. He blinked, then looked across the room, his eyes landing directly on me. "Wait," he said, his voice carrying through the microphone in his hand. "Wait a second." The crowd stirred, puzzled by his hesitation. He turned the phone so everyone could see the image on the screen. My breath caught. It was me in the gown from the Billboard shoot, eyes steady, chin raised, beauty undeniable. Gasps erupted around the room. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The image seemed to hang in the air like a ghost, impossible to ignore. "Isn't this you?" he asked, his words slow, deliberate, eyes narrowing on me. His hand shook slightly, as though even he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The silence was suffocating. I felt hundreds of eyes shift in my direction, burning into me, searching for confirmation. My heart pounded so loud, it drowned the music, the chatter, everything. My lips parted, but no words came out. My sister's face, drained of color, then flushed red with fury. "That's ridiculous," she snapped, stepping forward. "That can't be her. Amelia doesn't, she could never." But her voice cracked on the last word, betraying her disbelief. Her fiancé swiped again, pulling up another image, then another. The Vogue cover, the campaign shot, the Billboard mock-up. Each photo struck the room like thunder. People pulled out their own phones, whispering, scrolling, comparing. Within seconds, the confirmation spread. It was me. Someone near the stage began filming. Another whispered loudly enough for the crowd to hear. "It's her. She's the Billboard girl." The words lit a spark that blazed across the room. Guests surged with excitement, their murmurs swelling into a frenzy. Phones flashed, videos were posted, and then, almost instantly, the first notification popped up on my screen. A hashtag, Billboard Girl. The hashtag spread like wildfire, igniting social media beyond the ballroom walls. Within minutes, clips of my stunned face, the Billboard photos, and my sister's horrified reaction went viral. I could see it happening in real time, strangers reshaping the narrative of my life, from invisible to unforgettable, from plain to a phenomenon. My sister's hand trembled as she grabbed at her fiancé's arm, her voice sharp. "Turn it off! Stop this! She's nothing! This is some trick!" But the damage was already done. The truth was projected not just on his phone, but across a city, across millions of screens, and now across her perfect evening. I stood frozen, caught between terror and exhilaration. This wasn't how I had planned to reveal my truth. I had wanted control, preparation, a moment of my choosing. But destiny had chosen for me, and it had chosen here, now, in the very palace she had built for herself. And that was only the beginning of her downfall. Chaos erupted in the ballroom. My sister's perfect evening unraveled like cheap thread. The guests' whispers grew into waves of gossip, their curious stares shifting from her glittering gown to my stunned expression. She could feel her empire crumbling beneath her feet, and in desperation, she did what she had always done, attack. "She doesn't deserve this," she screamed, her voice sharp enough to pierce glass. "She's nobody. She's nothing but the plain one, the mistake we've carried for years." Her face twisted, ugly in its rage. Guests recoiled, their champagne flutes trembling in their hands. The image she had so carefully curated shattered in seconds, revealing the venom beneath. I stood motionless, my breath trapped in my chest. Her words echoed across the marble walls, each syllable cutting deeper than the last. For years, I had carried those same insults silently, swallowing them like poison. But now, spoken before an audience, they no longer weakened me, they weakened her. Every guest who had once admired her saw the cruelty, the jealousy she tried to hide. She grabbed the microphone, her hands shaking. "You all think she's special? She's not. This is a trick, a scam. Look at her. She doesn't even belong here." Her voice cracked, desperation pouring through her tone. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and someone whispered, "Why would she say that?" The energy shifted. It was no longer me under scrutiny, it was her. What she screamed next made everyone gasp. "You'll never outshine me, Amelia," she howled, pointing at me with trembling fingers. "Because without me, you're nothing." The silence that followed was suffocating. She realized too late that she had exposed the truth. This wasn't about me. It was about her fear of being replaced, of losing the throne she had ruled so ruthlessly. And then her fiancé stepped forward. He took the microphone gently from her grasp, his voice calm but firm. "Enough." The word cut through her hysteria like a blade. He turned toward me, his eyes steady. "I knew," he said, his voice carrying over the hushed crowd. "I knew it was her on the billboard. I've known for weeks." A ripple of shock ran through the room. My sister's head snapped toward him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You what?" He didn't flinch. "I knew, and I chose tonight to reveal it, because it's time everyone saw the truth. Amelia is not plain. She never was. She is stronger, braver, and far more beautiful than you've ever allowed her to be." His words echoed in the air, undeniable. My sister staggered back, her hand clutching her chest as though she had been struck. "You can't mean that," she whispered, her voice cracking. But he wasn't done. He looked her squarely in the eye, his tone unwavering. "I've always admired her strength more than your vanity." The room erupted in murmurs. Guests exchanged looks, some of pity, others of judgment. Cameras caught every flicker of emotion, every crack in her facade. She had built her kingdom on appearance, and in one moment it collapsed. I felt my heart lurch. I hadn't asked for this. I hadn't planned for him to stand on my side, hadn't wanted him to turn her humiliation into my coronation. This wasn't revenge orchestrated by me. It was his revelation, his choice, and it left me shaken. My sister's voice broke into sobs. She clutched at his arm, begging, "Please, you don't mean that. Say you don't mean it." But he gently pulled away, leaving her grasping at air. I stood there, frozen, as the weight of his words sank into me. The crowd's eyes burned, waiting for my response. Inside, my thoughts swirled. Relief, guilt, shock, all colliding at once. I had dreamed of the day when my family would see me for who I was, but not like this. Not at the cost of watching her collapse so violently. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. I wanted to disappear back into the safety of my shadows. But another part of me whispered that maybe this was exactly where I was meant to stand, in the center of the storm, no longer invisible. My chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. The choice loomed over me like a cliff's edge. Do I let this play out as my silent revenge? Or do I step in to stop her destruction before it consumes her entirely? Was I meant to fight or to forgive? Now I had to decide if I wanted to fight or forgive. The morning after the engagement party, the headlines exploded. Billboard girl revealed at family gala. Clips from the night flooded TikTok, Instagram, even morning television. My stunned face next to the towering billboard images. became the symbol of a new trend. The invisible woman who finally stepped into the light. But along with the fame came the fury. My sister struck back. By noon, fake stories spread across anonymous accounts, painting me as a fraud. She bought her followers. She tricked her way into that photo shoot. Her pictures were heavily edited. My phone buzzed endlessly with alerts, the venom multiplying by the hour. Then came the cruelest rumor, claims that I had stolen the campaign from my sister, that the Billboard was never meant to feature me at all. I sat on my bed, scrolling through the lies, my chest hollow. For a moment, I wondered if she had finally won. If drowning me in deceit could erase what had happened in front of all those witnesses. But then I remembered something she didn't know. I had proof. Months earlier, when I began earning small modeling opportunities, I learned the importance of protecting myself. I had saved every email, every signed contract, every message from agencies and photographers. My laptop became my vault, and in that vault, I also kept records of something far more damning. Documents I had stumbled upon by accident. Things my sister would have killed to keep hidden. It began when she borrowed my computer one night months ago, too careless to log out of her accounts. I hadn't meant to snoop, but the notifications kept flashing. Transfers, withdrawals, receipts, money flowing from accounts labeled under my parents' names into her own private fund. At first, I thought I was mistaken. But the deeper I looked, the clearer it became. She had been siphoning from the family's savings for years. Vacations, designer clothes, business expenses. All financed by theft disguised as entitlement. Now, as her smear campaign spread like wildfire, I opened the files again. Screenshots of bank transfers, emails requesting funds in forged tones of politeness, even scanned copies of altered checks. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from clarity. If she wanted war, I had the arsenal to end it. I contacted a journalist who had reached out after the Billboard reveal. At first, my voice shook as I explained, but when I sent the evidence, her response was immediate. "This is bigger than a viral story. This is fraud." The article went live that evening. The headline was merciless. Family heiress accused of embezzling parents' wealth. Screenshots plastered across the page. Receipts matched to her shopping sprees. Dates and times too precise to deny. Within hours, every social feed turned against her. At first, she fought back, calling it fake, calling me vindictive. But denial only fueled the fire. Comment sections filled with receipts of their own. Old stories of her arrogance, old screenshots from people she had scammed or belittled. The walls of her kingdom collapsed piece by piece, and this time the truth was on my side. Her fiancé ended the engagement publicly, releasing a statement. "I cannot stand beside someone who builds her life on deception." My parents, once her fiercest defenders, withdrew in shame, retreating from the very community they once boasted to. Invitations stopped coming. Partnerships evaporated. She was no longer the queen. She was the scandal. I watched it all unfold, not with joy, but with a complicated ache. One evening, I sat alone in my apartment, the glow of my laptop screen reflecting off the tears sliding down my cheeks. For years, I had prayed for them to see me, not as plain, not as invisible, but as someone who mattered. And now they did, but only because my sister had fallen so far. I wept, not for her, but for the little girl I had once been, the one who had begged silently for love she never received. That child had finally been acknowledged, finally validated. The tears weren't of triumph, they were of release. The calls poured in, brands wanting me as their face, agencies offering contracts, strangers sending letters of admiration. Yet in the middle of it all, I paused, hand pressed to my chest, whispering to myself, it was never really about revenge, it was about freedom. The night my sister's name trended for all the wrong reasons, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The world finally knew the truth, but my heart knew something more important. I had survived her cruelty, her manipulation, her lies, and I had turned the poison into power. But revenge was never my ending. It was only my beginning. The weeks after my sister's collapse felt like breathing in air for the first time. The silence from her was deafening, and I chose to keep it that way. For the first time in my life, I didn't answer her texts, her calls, her desperate pleas to explain. My number, once always available, was cut off. No more invitations to family dinners that turned into interrogations. No more obligations that left me drained. I enforced no contact, and though it was painful, it was also liberating. My parents tried to intervene, calling me late into the night. "She's still your sister," my mother cried. "Family is family." But I had learned the hardest truth. Family does not excuse cruelty. Blood is not a free pass for betrayal. So I repeated the same words, calm and steady, until they sank in. I will not let her hurt me anymore. The internet, meanwhile, carried me forward like a tide. The hashtag #FromPlaneToPower trended for weeks. People resharing clips of me standing silently in that ballroom as my sister unraveled. Strangers turned me into a symbol, proof that the invisible could rise, that the overlooked could claim their light. My inbox overflowed with stories from women who had been labeled not enough, who had been overshadowed by louder siblings, manipulative parents, toxic relatives. They wrote, "You gave me courage, you made me believe I matter too." Reading their words was heavier than any crown. I realized this journey had grown beyond me. It wasn't just about reclaiming my voice, it was about amplifying the voices of others who had been silenced. For the first time, I felt purpose blooming in my chest, stronger than the bitterness of revenge. I set boundaries online just as I had in life. I refused to engage in petty wars, refused to respond to gossip, refused to let my sister's shadow define me anymore. My account was no longer a battleground. It became a sanctuary. I posted about resilience, about healing, about the long road of learning to love the reflection in the mirror. The world listened. And then one morning, as I sipped coffee by my window, an email arrived that made me pause mid-breath. The subject line was simple, TED invitation. My hands shook as I opened it. They wanted me to speak, not about fashion, not about fame, but about survival. About growing up in the grip of a toxic family and finding self-worth in the ashes. They wanted me to stand on a stage where the world's brightest minds shared their truth, and share mine. For a long moment, I stared at the screen, tears blurring the words. The girl who had been silenced, dismissed, erased, was now being asked to speak, loudly, publicly, authentically. I whispered to myself, it's time. But one unexpected message in my inbox changed everything. The same week, a global fashion house reached out. Not just for a campaign, not just for a single billboard. They wanted me as their ambassador. The face of their new line, broadcast across continents, from New York to Paris, Tokyo to São Paulo. They sent a mock-up, my face stretched across skyscrapers, my name beside words like strength, resilience, beauty reborn. I pressed my hand to my lip, stunned. This was beyond anything I had imagined. The launch aligned perfectly with my TED Talk. In 1 week, I went from silence to the loudest platforms in the world. I practiced my speech in front of mirrors, in empty rooms, whispering the words that once felt impossible to say. I was never plain. I was silenced. And when I stopped letting them write my story, I found my voice. The day of the TED Talk, I stepped onto the stage, lights blinding, heart thundering. The audience held their breath as I began. I spoke of my childhood label, of the scars it left, of the secret rebirth no one saw. I spoke of betrayal, of justice, of the cost of silence and the power of boundaries. I saw tears glisten in the crowd, heads nodding, people leaning forward as if my words were the very ones they had been waiting to hear. Afterward, the applause thundered. Strangers rose to their feet, not for the Billboard girl, but for Amelia, the woman who had survived. That night, the world didn't just see my face, they heard my voice. Days later, the fashion house launched the campaign. My image illuminated Times Square, Paris boulevards, Tokyo's neon skyline. Everywhere I looked, my reflection stared back, not the plain sister, not the invisible shadow, but the woman who had risen. I walked down a street in Manhattan, craning my neck to see the towering billboard, the lights casting me in hues of gold. People pointed, whispered, took photos, but I didn't feel like an object under their gaze. I felt whole. I felt free. I wasn't thinking of my sister. I wasn't thinking of the family who had dismissed me. I was thinking of the girl in the mirror who had once whispered, "You're beautiful," and barely believed it. Now the world believed it too, but most importantly, so did I. I leaned against the railing, watching the crowd beneath the glowing image. A tear slipped down my cheek, not from sadness, not from triumph, but from peace. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living,